Mike and Mary, welcome to the show.
Hi. Hey,
Please give us a brief bio on yourselves.
we're in our 30s. We're in Oklahoma. We're both professionals. We live in a small town of, about 25,000 people. We're about 45 miles east of Oklahoma City, roughly. We live probably 10 minutes, 20 minutes from the nearest town. We're in a small community. We live on a dirt road, about a mile and a half off a paved road. Right past our house is a cul-de-sac that turns into a dead end. We're very much in a wooded community. Our nearest neighbor is probably a quarter of a mile in either direction, maybe a little bit further.
Thanks, Mary. Do you have anything to add to that, Mike?
My name's Mike, and like Mary said, we live in a wooded area. We enjoy the privacy. We both lived in metropolitan cities, and we like where we live now. I was 4 years in the Marine Corps, got into security, and very much into martial arts. So is Mary. We both are into training quite a bit. We've had encounters where we've been outside working out in the evening time where it's like something was watching us.
It seems like ever since you two moved into that house, the action's been non-stop. I can't even imagine what you two have been going through. Mike, there's a creepy house on a cul-de-sac in your neighborhood that you were telling me about in the pre-interview. Please tell the listeners about that house and what makes it so creepy.
The cul-de-sac that is probably about almost a mile from where we live. It's been vacant for probably 3 to 4 years. I'm not really sure the story behind that, but the owners moved out, and since then, I think people that have been in the area have probably noticed that no one lives there, and sadly, people have broken in, and it's basically a house that sits in the far end of the cul-de-sac, and it's surrounded by nothing but wooded area now. The grass has gotten tall. Probably anyone ever goes down there anymore. I've driven down there at night before just to see if there's anything out and about. It's pitch black. Where your light hits is the only thing you're going to see. It's so dark down in that area. Back in December, my neighbor, he was needing some help. He was wanting to cut down a Christmas tree. I was off work that day. I think I was on full vacation or something. And he asked if I'd help him. So I said, yeah, no problem. So we get in his truck and we drive down there. And it was a fairly warm day. He was cutting his tree, and we found one. We had actually walked the whole area. To kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, it's all gravel in every direction. There's either tall trees or there's cedar trees all over the place, and it's real thick. The area where the house sits, it sits in a northeastern part of that cul-de-sac, and it's at the bottom of the hill, and the incline on that hill is actually pretty steep. During the wintertime, if we have snow, you're going to need a four-wheel drive to get up that, because nothing else would actually get you past that because it's very isolated. Well, back in December, like I said, he was cutting his tree down, and I kind of glanced over my shoulder, and I thought I'd seen something watching us where the woods were, but like I said, it's so thick back there that anything could hide, and or it could be looking right at you, and you wouldn't even see it. I kind of looked over again, and I didn't see anything, but I could have swore I'd seen a branch moving. Well, my neighbor, he was done cutting the tree, and we loaded the tree up in the back of the truck. And I said, well, I'm kind of curious. Let's go look in the house. The door's already wide open. Let's just have a look inside. So we both went inside and had a look, and there was the most heinous, most rancid smell of dog that you could think of. I mean, it was as if a dog had been laying there for probably weeks at a time. There was a spot on the carpet. I didn't know if that was from the previous occupants or someone squatting there, but there was a really huge area on the carpet that was just stained. But the way it looked is that something had been laying there. Like I said, there was dirt all over the ground anyway, but where the carpet was, I mean, obviously something had been sleeping there. The smell in the house was actually just wet dog. I mean, just like a wet dog had lived there and had stayed there, and that's where its domain was. I mean, it was just really pungent too. Like it had urinated in the house, and if there was something living in there, I mean, I really felt like we were intruding on his territory, or safe to say, his house.
Yeah, it sure does sound like something's been living there. I hope it's not that dog man. I'm just glad nothing was in there when you two went in there to take a look around.
Exactly. I could never get out of my head of how the smell was. I mean, it was obviously we were in an area where I felt like we had walked into something's den. And my neighbor, he's very much a skeptic. It could be right in front of him, and he would still find an excuse as to what it is. He and I both agreed, let's just go. And of course, what he said was, well, there's been probably a pack of dogs that lived in here. And I was like, yeah, okay. I didn't want to get into an argument with him because we've gone back and forth on it anyway.
Yeah, if your neighbor's that skeptical, you probably would be wasting your time trying to convince him of any of this. I don't blame you for not even bothering. Since almost everything that we're going to talk about tonight happened either around your house or in your neighborhood, please do the best you can to paint a picture for us of what the layout is like in that area.
Right off the front of our house, there's probably 20, 30 trees. It's pretty much open, probably 40 feet. Right across from our house is our front road, and then off to the left, if you're standing on the front of our steps, would be where we park. That's probably another good 40 or 50 feet from the house. Probably 20, 30 feet from there is our well house, which is in a big stand of trees. And then our neighbor's yard would start probably another 50 feet from there. Straight in front of our driveway is the road that we come in on. Off to the left would be the cul-de-sac. Across the road directly in front of us has been empty for years and years and years. They've just recently moved in a couple of houses there. To our right is more of our land. We have two big lots. It's pretty much open in the front, very much wooded in the back. Towards our right-hand side would be our next neighbor. A little bit more secluded. We have kind of a little chunk of woods between us, a good stand of trees. And then kitty corner from our property is another house. And then there's probably two more houses up. So we're kind of hidden back past us towards the cul-de-sac, and there's no one living down there at the moment. It's all empty. And we're the only ones on this whole end that have a street light at all.
Wow, that is so hard to believe that you're the only people there in that area who have the sense to have lights put up.
Also, I'd like to add that where our back property is, it goes back about another 80 yards of thick wooded area. Then it kind of turns into a meadow. And when it turns into a meadow, that goes for about another 30 to 40 yards. Then there's a fence there. And if you go past that fence, it's a really massive cow pasture. It's about 4,000 acres of open pasture. And the farmer, he lives at least a mile away. But, I mean, from our back property to his, I mean, it's probably about a mile. And to get to there, I mean, it's going to take a while through all the thicket.
But then where his pasture ends is all woods, and then that backs up to a river.
Yeah.
Well, it sure sounds like perfect habitat for a dog, man. They've got a lot of cover, and they can move around the area without being seen, so how could they ask for more? Mike, you've got a neighbor who was telling you about how his son late one night came into his bedroom to tell him about something that had been looking in his window at him. Please tell us about what happened.
This was back in 2011, I believe. His son was, I want to say, around maybe 5 to 6 years old. We didn't know them very well, other than I knew he worked in the correctional system as a guard. So, given my background, he and I, we would chat about stuff like that. And one night we were talking, and I decided to kind of see if maybe they had had any weird encounters or anything. And I had asked them, has anything ever struck you as weird happened out here? As what happened, he actually worked in another city, and he would be gone for days at a time, and his wife worked long hours too, so they really couldn't say that they had seen anything. But what he did tell me was one night his son looked out the window and saw what he described was a werewolf looking right at him. Said that he could see its teeth, its yellow eyes were staring right at him, and his son took off running and was obviously very upset about the whole thing. He basically summed it up to being, oh, you know, you just had a bad dream. There's nothing out there. Of course, I didn't really get to talk too much to him because maybe 6 months later they had actually moved out. But up until hearing that story, it just reaffirmed stuff that we had already been dealing with anyway here.
That poor kid. I can't imagine what he's been through after seeing something like that looking in his bedroom window at him, and then here he goes to his dad's bedroom for help, and to get a response like that, that's awful.
Yeah, exactly. We both felt bad for the kid, and like I said, it reaffirmed to us, okay, well, we're not the only ones that have actually seen something out here or heard something. I mean, sadly, it was the neighbor's little boy that had seen it. We wanted to tell him, look, you've obviously got something going on, but at that point, they wouldn't have believed us anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. They probably wouldn't have believed you. Mary, about 4 months ago, you and Mike were getting ready to go to bed. You got up to go over and shut the front door. When you did, you found out that you weren't alone. Please tell us about what happened that night.
We had been watching TV, and we were sitting on the couch, and we decided that it was time for bed. Mike had walked into the kitchen to put up his coffee cup, and I was going to lock the door, and I just grabbed the knob and was just getting ready to turn it, and there was a huge force behind it. I mean, it just caught me off guard, and I just kind of shoved really quick, and there's like linoleum right in front of our door. I was wearing socks. Whatever hit that door hit with such force that it was pushing me back. I yelled to Mike. I was like, I need your help. I can't hold this door. I can't shut it. He came running around the corner and hit the door with all his weight, and we were able to finally latch the door, but there was something on the other side hitting with force. It's enough to put chills down your spine forever. I mean, that was a scary, scary night. There was no doubt about it. Something was trying to come in.
After you two were able to get that door closed, what happened then?
After the door was closed, I grabbed my pistol. I'll go ahead and backtrack a little bit. An hour and a half prior, we had been watching TV, and we noticed there was a loud thumping sound on our back deck. And after living here for all these years, Mary and I were both like, here we go again. You know, there's something out here. I had actually went to the bedroom and pulled out my Glock and set it on the table by our couch. It was still in its box, but I thought, well, if something does happen, at least it's nearby and it's accessible, and having it nearby was a better peace of mind for both of us. We didn't hear anything else rest of that night. Before that, it got quiet, but it felt better having it. And knowing the way things had happened out here before, we weren't going to take any chances. And that night when something did hit our door the same night, it was an hour and a half later. Like Mary said, I was in the kitchen, and she looks right at me with this, I mean, just the look on her face was, help me, help me. I just made a beeline for it. I'm 6'2", and I weigh 315 pounds, and I work out quite a bit. So, I mean, I just put all my force behind that door, and with my foot against the door, I leaned over, grabbed the firearm, and I told Mary, I said, if this keeps up, I'm going to fire right through this door. I'm not taking any more chances with this thing. That's when I noticed that the screen door was actually shutting. And that really sent a really massive chill up both our spines, because it was a matter of, okay, we're not imagining this. This is real. The screen door just shut, because we could see it through our other door, through our main door. The really scary part was, okay, whatever it was has backed off, but where to go? Is it going to be standing in our yard when I open this door? Where's it going to be? But I went on ahead and opened the door, had my firearm ready in case something did happen. I walked down the steps, and our dog, he was in his house. He was not going to come out at all. I couldn't have bribed him for all the kibble in the world for him to come out at that point. I walked over there on the west side of the house, and that's when I heard a crashing sound of limbs and branches breaking, like something had, after I pushed the door and we had started pushing back, it's almost like it jumped off the side of the porch and quickly went around the west side of the house and just made a beeline for the wooded area in our back part of the house.
Yeah, that would be really hard to deal with. After that happened, were you two talking about moving, or were you dead set on staying there?
No, like I said, it was more, we can't believe it actually got this close to our door. We were just trying to have a regular night of watching TV. And when it's pushing our door, that's when we realized, okay, not only do we have to tighten up our security even more, but now we have to worry about something that's going to have the audacity to actually come crashing through our door for all we knew. You know, I mean, that's what was running through, I think, both of our heads.
Were you two able to even get a wink of sleep that night?
No, not really. We pretty much lay there and listened the rest of the night. I don't recall ever hearing anything else, but I mean, we probably didn't doze off till probably around 2:30 or 3 a.m. that morning.
Oh, I'm not surprised after going through something like that. You said that your dog had jumped upon her doghouse earlier that evening and was barking aggressively. Please tell us about that.
Yes, when we had actually heard that movement on our back steps, it was probably about maybe not, and I had actually went and gotten the firearm out. It was probably about maybe 5 minutes later. We could hear our female. She's around the east side of the house where her doghouse is around the front where we could still see her. She weighs probably around 150 pounds, and she's a big dog. She had actually jumped on top of her doghouse and was, teeth were bared, barking, and whatever she was seeing, she was visibly upset about. She was not happy. Everything about her was saying, go away, get away from us, get away from this yard. And she barked for probably around maybe 5 minutes. We kept an eye on her, and I had actually went outside then went and calmed her down some, and I didn't see anything, but, it was just, like I said, that ominous feeling was back, and just like I was being watched.
As if everything that you've talked about so far isn't creepy enough, you also told me that something's been jiggling doorknobs in your neighborhood.
Yes, I believe that the first incident probably was around 2011 on our back deck. We had actually been hearing something that night, too. It was around wintertime, and we actually were watching TV, and we just heard a click, 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 click sound. We both turned around and looked, and the doorknob was actually jiggling. We couldn't actually see through the window because whatever it was, the light was actually off in our laundry room that leads up to the back deck. But, something was obviously standing there that was very dark. We couldn't really see anything, though, but what we did see was actually the doorknob being jiggled. One of our neighbors that lives on the other side, her house is actually about, I'm going to say, probably about a half a mile away if you go west of us, but in the same complex. Her niece is someone that I knew. So I stopped one day and said hi to her, and, it's another one of those things where I just asked her, has your aunt ever said anything weird that has taken place in this area? Her aunt lives alone. With anybody that lived out here by themselves, I can imagine if they've seen something, how much more alone that they feel. But she actually did say one night she saw something walk by her bay window out of the corner of her eye, and her back door actually started doing the same thing. It was jiggling. And she had said that what her aunt told her was that she had heard a snarl from behind that door. She's a tribal member, too, and we had actually discussed, well, what do you think it is? And she had said, well, she doesn't know, but she's open to the idea that whatever this was not a human at all and was probably into the realm of what lurks in the shadows.
Yeah, she just might have been right. In 1983, there were a lot of strange occurrences that took place around a location your family called The Hill. Please tell us about The Hill and what happened there.
The Hill, it's actually a place where my great-grandfather, he built a house out there with my great-grandmother. I believe when the house was built, it was probably around 1910, but they had actually sold that property probably around the late 1800s. My great-grandmother, she had numerous kids. Of course, their kids had kids, and it was a big family that we have. But the Hill was actually more of a place where once a year, family get-together, stuff like that. It's actually a very high point in the county where my parents live. It's probably, I'm going to say, around about a mile from where my parents live. And between there and my parents' house is real thick woods. There's a trail that actually leads to it. And I remember being a kid and walking that trail. When you're a kid, you could get away with walking the backwoods. It seemed like 30 years ago. But a lot of that changed, though, in 1983. It was during the summertime. Bear in mind, this accounts from family members that do recall what happened. A couple of them have passed on since then. But one night, my great-uncle, they used to call him Big John, was on his porch one night, and he heard this really, really loud roaring sound, and it came from his garden. He gets up, he's looking down there, and, well, of course, I'm sure at that time he was probably sit there kind of bewildered as to what in the world is that. Well, not even 10 minutes later, where my parents lived, my grandfather, he had heard the same thing. When my grandfather went outside to go listen, he could hear something thrashing in the woods, like it was going through busted branches, and they all agreed that what they had smelled was something that smelled like a river bottom almost. I mean, just a really bad stench and a loud roaring sound. It never stopped either. I mean, they could hear it walking around all night long, just about. My grandfather, he had went back inside. He had gotten his rifle out. The way my grandfather had told me himself before he passed, because I had asked him a few times about it, and when this went on, I was just still a little kid. But what he had told me is when he had actually walked down to the fence line where the wood started, he goes, you know, I've been in World War II. I've been shot. I've seen combat. I've seen friends die. I've seen the worst of the worst and what it was like over there. And he goes, when I came back, I didn't have any fear of anything. Nothing scared me. He goes, but once I walked to that fence line and I looked into the darkness, even though I did have a weapon on me, I was chilled all the way to the bone. And because I can't even describe the amount of fear I had when I heard it growling, knowing this was something that can be explained. I believe it was probably around 8 or 9 of my family members and friends of the family that actually heard this thing on a nightly basis. This went on for probably around, I want to say, a week. When this started happening, though, word got around a little bit, but I think a lot of people didn't believe that something was actually going around that was that loud and couldn't be explained. My mom had said, you knew when it was coming because before the roaring would even start, she goes, you could smell the river bottom, and it smelled like a combination of wet dog, river bottom, and something like rotted meat. And she goes, it had the most terrible stench that you could imagine. You could hear it growling. She goes, it would send shivers down your spine. It got to a point where every night they would dread when nightfall would come in because it was a matter of we had to deal with this again.
There's a Native American church located around that area that you were telling me about in the pre-interview. From what you said, an elder had spent a night there that she'll never forget. Please tell us about what happened to her.
Yes, a lot of the family members and a lot of people that are from the tribe, they come up there, and at that time they had camp houses out there where each family, they had a house built, and whenever they would have church services on Sunday nights, some of them who drove from miles away could stay in the houses, or if they decided that they just wanted a place to stay, that was a place where they could. One of the elders from the tribe, she was staying in one of those camp houses, but around the same time when this was going on, she had actually made her way to one of the outhouses. This was probably around, I'd say from the camp house to the outhouse, I want to say it was probably about 50 yards away. Of course, in the dark, it's even scarier. She had actually was in the outhouse and heard it, and she could hear it walking. What she described was its breathing was very labored. It was very big, and she didn't dare look out. I think she had probably stayed in there for maybe 2 hours until I think somebody had come looking for her going, what are you still doing down there? But the church, wrote to my parents, it's probably around, I would say that's about maybe less than a half a mile away. But that same area, I mean, it's a very open area. Throughout the years, some of the camp houses have been torn down. But when she said that she had heard that and it got quiet again, she walked out of the outhouse and made her way back to the place where she was staying. Some of the people that were with her were sitting there going, why were you gone for so long? Well, later on that night, I forgot about this. They were sleeping, and where the yard light was for the church, they had actually seen something massive walking that blocked the light out that walks by the window. They could not explain what they were seeing, but all of a sudden, maybe not even 20 seconds later, the roaring started again behind their house on the church property. That night, my mom had said that she could hear it there, too. It really kind of baffled them because they're sitting there going, why is it on this side of the church property now? I mean, it's never gone up there before, until they realized that there were some people staying up there. I mean, it was almost like whatever it was had the sole purpose of terrifying everybody that lived within that area for a week straight.
If whatever it was that was doing that had terrifying everyone in the area on its mind, it sure sounds to me like it did a really good job of it. And as far as that poor woman, I can't even imagine what she went through, especially having to sit in that outhouse for 2 hours. That's rough.
Like I said, a few of the people, they passed on since then. Everyone had the same story, but a different account of what they were doing when it happened. You know, I think everybody could recall what exactly was going on that night when they heard it and how they felt and how scary this roaring was. There was questions of what could it be? Could it be a Sasquatch? Is it something just unknown? If you looked in the area where its trail was and where it had been stomping through, people had actually walked through there during the daytime, and a lot of the grass that it had walked through was just tore down, and obviously something big had been making its way through there for the previous nights.
It sure makes you wonder what's on that thing's mind to do what it did and terrorize people in that area night after night the way it did. That's awful. In late March of 2009, you two were walking the property that you bought and consequently built that house on when something unnerving happened to you. Please tell us about what happened that night.
Well, I found a property that I liked, and I'd seen it in the daylight, and I had talked to Mike and wanted to show him. By the time we both got off work, it was probably just after sunset. The sun was just going down. It was kind of a wet night. It was kind of drizzling, not real rain yet. A sprinkle was going on. We came out and seen the property. We didn't even have a driveway at that point. We parked in the middle of the road, basically, and walked all the way from up where our property is now, all the way down to the cul-de-sac, and kind of got a feel for the whole property. When we were coming back from the cul-de-sac, we had noticed that we weren't coming back alone. We could hear footsteps. It's solid black all the way around us. There's no light down there. Of course, there was no light at our property because no one was there yet. It was all wood. We're coming back up on the gravel, and we could hear something cross the gravel way behind us. And we heard it on one side of the road, and then we heard it on the other side of the road, and we thought, well, we should walk a little bit faster. We'd stop, and it would stop. We'd start walking, and it would start walking. And we thought, well, it's definitely not a dog. You know, it's not something normal. You know, a deer doesn't do that. And so we got up closer to our property, and we're walking back to the truck, and it was raining harder. It was coming down a little bit thicker. We were getting wet, and it was kind of like, well, you know, it's cold out here. It's dark out here. Let's go get some coffee, and we think we found our place. We were almost to the truck, and we could hear it, whatever it was, come off the grass and cross that gravel again. And gravel crunching under something, it sends chills up your spine. You never get used to that sound. We could hear that. We could hear something on the gravel coming up quick. We just made the comment of it's time to leave. We jumped in the truck, started it up, locked the doors, and got out of there. We heard this snarl right when we were opening up the truck doors. It was like a combination of a snort and a growl. It was just this, I guess the best way to put it was aggression, but it was also anger. I mean, it was kind of like it wasn't fast enough. And of course, with the rain, when I hit the brake light, you couldn't see anything behind us except just shadow because of the rain and the drizzle, and we have no idea exactly 100% what it was, but whatever was there was right behind the truck. It wasn't just one thing. There was two. I mean, it came up on both sides of the road. You could hear it coming up that hill, and when it crossed the road, one crossed, and then the other one crossed. And it was just like they're coming up through these woods where there's no light. You could hear it coming through branches, coming through, you know, the underbrush and the leaves. There's no way that was a person. It was way too heavy, way too deliberate, very, very creepy. We talked about it for the next couple of weeks. Every property we looked at didn't have anything we were looking for, and of course this one was creepy, but it actually felt like this was what we were looking for. So this is actually what we decided to get. It was probably a month later or so, and we'd actually bought the property. We had to have it cleared off for the house pad and for the driveway, and so when we were out here that original first time, it was all woods. There was just lots marked out, but for the most part, nothing had really been cut out yet. We were one of the first properties to actually go in and make our cut.
It sounds like a really nice property to me and a really nice area, but if you two could go back and do it all over again, would you have bought that property the way you did, or would you have bought a different property so that hopefully you wouldn't have had these problems?
I honestly don't know how to answer that. I guess at this point, if I knew what I know now, I would question it. But at the same time, this is home. This is what we wanted. This is how we built our house here. We plan on being here for a long time. it's really kind of a catch-22. I really don't know how to answer that because it's home.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. That does make good sense. About a year later, in March of 2010, you two were sitting out on your back deck at about 3 a.m. in the morning when something very unnerving happened. What happened that night?
It was March of 2010. That previous winter, we had actually had a pretty rough winter for Oklahoma, so everything was kind of behind schedule. The ground was frozen, and so there was a little bit of a delay, but once we got the go-ahead to finally get our stuff in there and we finally moved in and settled, it was well into springtime. At that time, Mary and I were both on a night schedule. We had both worked from afternoon to night shift, so for us to go to bed at 3, 4, even 5 in the morning was pretty normal. We'd get home, work out and stuff, and then we'll usually go sit on the back deck and cool off or have something to drink before we went to sleep. It was about 3 a.m. in the morning. We were sitting on the back property, and what was really strange was I was actually smoking a cigar that night. And at that time, Mary, she smoked cigarettes, and before she quit smoking, we were just relaxing and just enjoying the nice spring air. It was really cool out, but it felt really good. We had heard footsteps. This came from north of us. Sitting on our back deck, if you look out, it's straight north. We're kind of on a hill, so during wintertime, when it's not so thick, you can actually see the cattle field. Well, everything had been turning green, so we couldn't really see anything at all, but we could hear footsteps. It was on twos. It was so strange, though, because I looked at Mary and I go, "Do you hear that?" And she goes, "I do." Is that a person on our back property? I mean, it's 3 a.m. in the morning. Why would somebody be out there getting stickers, thorns, and everything else? It's not an easy area to walk, and everywhere you step, you're liable to either twist an ankle, or it's definitely ill-advised to go walking on our back property or any property out here, especially where it's real thick. So we both sat there for a minute, and it continued, and it started getting closer to our house. But it was almost like it was walking in the direction of southeast, which was going to put it probably within a distance of us seeing it. But, I mean, at that point, I didn't want to take any chances. And I had yelled out, "Hey, if there's somebody out there, get off our property. This is private property. You do not belong here." The walking, we could hear it. It stopped. And it got really quiet. We listened and didn't hear anything for probably a good 30 seconds. And all of a sudden, we could hear it again. And this time, it had shifted direction. It was coming right for us. And in that thicket, I mean, we could hear branches breaking, it stepping on limbs and leaves and everything else. At that time, Mary brought a flashlight out with her, and she had actually shined the light into where we could hear it from. Mary saw the eyes first. You want to kind of describe what you saw first?
It was kind of a yellowish, greenish eye. It was real quick. We saw it. The light beam caught it, and it blinked for a second and, like, backed up behind a tree. It was kind of hunched over, kind of a gray color, maybe. I definitely wouldn't call it black. But it was never, I never got the feeling it was standing completely straight up. It was always kind of hunched, kind of hunkered over. But it was real intently watching us. Anytime I could get it in the beam of light, it would deliberately go behind something else, and you hear it move off, and I'd have to try to find it again. And the only way I could find it was catching more eye shine. But it was always, I mean, we were 15 feet off the ground on this deck, and whatever it was tall. Whatever it was very, very tall. It wasn't by any means a raccoon on the ground. I mean, it is at least as big as a man, and probably a lot bigger because it was hunched over all the time. But it was moving through brambles and underbrush and deadfall from the entire winter. We've had massive, ice storms and snowstorms. So, I mean, to walk through there in the pitch black was just not something a normal person was going to do.
You said you didn't get a good look at this thing, but when you did get a glimpse, were you able to form an opinion on what it might have been?
All I can tell you is it had massive shoulders. We could see one huge shoulder. The eye spacing was pretty big, but it had big, tall ears. I mean, you could see the ears sticking out kind of around the tree. it would just kind of, it was like it was constantly trying to hide part of its face, where it wasn't completely in the light. But again, I didn't have like a super high-powered light. It was just a little flashlight. It was like it knew how far I could see. We only had so much eye shine, so much beam of light. But it wasn't long after that it started coming straight for the house.
Oh, no.
Yeah, once that started, we never picked up anything friendly about this. From the start, it was very much hostile. Being deployed, I've learned to trust my instincts, being in the military and doing security work and just dealing with situations. Instincts is something that I've always ran with and trusted. That night, every being within my body was telling me time to take action. I had took the light from Mary and said, can you go in there and grab the shotgun? I'll keep an eye on whatever this thing is because it's getting close. So Mary went into the house, and like she said, it would hide behind trees as it would get closer. Its behavior was so strange because it was almost like the first thing that come to mind was it's done this before. That's what kind of freaked me out a little bit was it was almost like it was making a game of what it was doing. By the time Mary came back out with a shotgun and handed it to me, she took the light and was still shining, and I had actually lost sight of it. But the general direction of where it was, we could still hear it almost like it was tapping the ground, almost like messing with the leaves and kind of letting us know, I'm still here, I'm watching you. And so I fired a shotgun round, a 12-gauge round, up above its head. The round itself, I mean, it echoed throughout the whole countryside. It was really loud. And right after that, we had heard like another snarl. And it got really quiet. It was probably within about 30 to 45 seconds, we could hear it backing off real slow. We heard it back up all the way till it got to the fence and the cattle pasture, and we heard the barbed wire just start shaking, like something had jumped it. I looked at Mary, and I was like, what just happened? At that point, it was a matter of, okay, now we're defending our home front. This is where we live, and whatever it was just trying to show dominance, trying to scare us, but it was wishful thinking and hoping that that would have been the end of that incident, but sadly it wasn't.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of things have happened after that incident. When you said it was coming in towards you at its closest point, how close was it to you?
I believe it was probably no more than 35 to 40 feet away. It was that close, but I mean, if you're in a lot of brush, that's still a good distance, but it was so thick. We've actually cleared out a lot of the area now, but where it was very close, and my biggest fear was whatever this thing was crouched. I was afraid of it getting within a clearing and then just making a leap for us. That was my biggest fear, and if I'm not going to hit it, I'm definitely going to scare it. It doesn't know that we're armed right now, and whether this thing knows what a gun is or not, it's about to. And so when I fired my weapon off, it just echoed throughout the whole countryside, and it automatically stopped. We saw another glimpse of it as it was backing up, but it was in that thicket, and it was hunkered down so low that we had actually even thought maybe it was crawling on its belly to get away from us. But once we heard it hit the fence in the back cattle pasture, we were like, okay, well, it's backed off quite a bit. We probably stood up there another 10 minutes listening, but it was still really quiet. So we had actually decided, okay, we're going to go inside, walk up, and we're going to have the gun nearby, but we're probably not going to sleep a wink anyway tonight.
Oh, I'll bet you didn't sleep a wink after something like that happening. Mike, Mary just talked about the two ears that she saw standing up on its head. Were you able to see those ears standing up on top of its head as well, or is that something that you just didn't get a chance to see?
Yes, I saw one on the right side of it, because it's like I was looking at the top of its head. I saw a glimpse of its eyes. But, of course, as it got closer, it was under all that brush. It was really kind of hard to make out the actual body. I was trying to gauge at that point exactly where I was going to fire at. But in the back of my mind, too, I was sitting there thinking, okay, please not let this be some stupid teenage kid, which we both knew it wasn't, but let this not be some stupid teenage kid that ended up getting shot because he was wearing a costume trying to scare someone who wasn't going to take any chances. But when I elected to fire in the air, I really feel like that night in particular, it actually stopped it in its tracks. I know I didn't hit it, but it was enough for it to step off and back up and start making its way out of there. Like I said, what kept running through my mind that night was, we're defending our home tonight. We bought this place, we worked for it, and nothing is going to scare us, not no person or the unexplained. We both kind of had this feeling it would come back, which other things have happened, but it was a matter of, okay, this is where we live, and whether we have to deal with this again or not, we'll be ready for it.
Well, that's impressive that you two have the kind of fortitude that you've got. Most people would have sold that house straight away. From what I understand, every Sunday night after that, for some time, strange things would happen around your property. Please tell us about that.
It kind of goes in line with hearing stuff on our back deck. We would hear stuff running, like something would leak. One night, we were getting ready for bed, and something hit the side of our house. The way it hit it, there was a lot of force behind it. It made us both jump, and we're sitting on, what in the world was that? But it was almost like it was on Sunday nights, whenever it would happen. And this lasted for probably maybe 2 or 3 months. Some nights we could just hear something running across the road. This was before we had gotten our yard light, so where our porch light shined off was only to the road. You could barely even see them, so if something was across the road, it had a lot of thicket to run through and get around our property and not be seen at all.
Yeah, that's one of the most unnerving things about the way your property is laid out. One of these things is all kinds of places that could move without being seen.
Around that same time, we had heard something hit the side of the house, and at first we thought it was whatever this thing was, but the way it hit was a lot of force, and we had heard a loud growling sound behind our property. We didn't go outside that night, but, of course, we always had our firearms out. Nothing else happened. Well, morning time comes, and we had went about our day, and I had remembered, last night, whatever hit our house, it felt like more like it threw something. So I walked behind the house, and I found a dead possum that it had actually thrown, and you could actually even see where the possum actually hit behind our house and was laying on the ground.
Yeah, that's not the first time I've heard of something like that happening, where an animal was thrown up against an outside wall of a house like that. Mary, there is an incident that happened about 4 weeks later where car alarms were being set off in your neighborhood. Please tell us about that.
I hadn't been home too long. I got off work and came home, and I was in the house maybe just a few minutes. I don't think I'd been home very long. And I'd heard alarm go off, and I thought, well, that's kind of strange. There's not that many people out here. Right after I heard our neighbor's alarm go off, another alarm went off, and then our alarm went off. At first I thought it was someone that came through and was, hitting cars, because if you hit a car just the right way, you can maybe send off an alarm, and something had ran through and hit 3 or 4 cars just hard enough to make the alarms go off. All I could think of was, there's no way it could be a person. It's pitch black out here. It's dark. There's underbrush. It's gravel. There's no way you could run from one property to the next that quickly, setting off all of these car alarms without, one, somebody seeing you, but number 2, you would trip, you would fall, you'd be cut with brambles or, clothesline yourself on a branch. There's no way it would be feasible. And I remember just stepping out on the step just far enough to hit my key to shut off the alarm. And I thought, if this doesn't work, it's just going to bell her until he gets home, because I'm not going out there. And then slowly you'd hear each neighbor come out and shut off their car alarm. It was just the most creepiest, unnerving sound. It was like something else was in control.
It goes without saying that dogmen do some really strange, creepy things, but when they do things like that require that much intelligence, that takes it to a whole new level.
Yeah, it's definitely given us some sleepless nights.
Though I can understand that. You wouldn't be the only one. Mike, about 2 weeks after that incident, you were coming home from work when you saw a police cruiser in the neighbor's driveway. Please tell us about what happened that night.
Yeah, it was about 10:30, and it was a really warm night. At that time, the neighbors, they're not the same people who live there now. This was a lady who lived by herself. She had a Great Pyrenees. The dog, he ran free because he would be in our yard. He was very shy and not a people person at all because we try to get him to come to us, trying to play with him. But he would run off, and this lady, we never got to talk to her. We didn't even know what she looked like. Wasn't very neighborly at all, which it didn't really matter to us because we had just moved in, so we never really got to say hi to her or anything. But one night, I had actually gotten off work, and when I was driving by her house, and since it's gravel, I go pretty slow, I saw a police cruiser over there, and I thought, well, that's really strange, and I couldn't make out if it was the local highway patrol or if it was the sheriff's office. But I went on ahead and pulled in. I got a little bit curious about it, so I walked to the end of our property. Mary was with me, and we could hear them talking. And the lady, she was a little bit frantic, but like she had been upset at something, and she was just finally calming down. The police officer had said, well, whatever animal this was, it tore your Great Pyrenean apart. It was in pieces. We'll keep an eye out for something, ma'am, but I mean, it's going to be up to you to bury this dog. We can't do it for you. But whatever killed your dog had actually tore it apart.
Wow, that's such a shame.
We really couldn't get much information from it because, like I said, we didn't know her. But I know that within probably 2 to 3 weeks, at most a month, she actually up and moved. We never saw her after that. So we never got to talk to her and ask what had happened. But, I mean, that dog was not very social anyway. So whatever had actually got a hold of it, I mean, it had to have ambushed it from a tree or maybe it just outran it and caught it. But whatever it was, I mean, this dog was a really big dog, too. We played scenarios in our head of, okay, well, was it a cougar? What type of animal could have done that? But just the fact that it was in that yard where houses, people were already moving in, so any other wildlife was kind of getting pushed out as far as like cougars go and stuff, or mountain lions. So whatever killed this Great Pyrenean, I mean, it was creepy. It really creeped us both out. It was a matter of Mary and I looking at each other going, well, apparently we're not the only ones that something has happened to. We're definitely not alone here.
Yeah, sure does sound like it. Mary, in 2010, when you were getting home from work, something had hit your well house before Mike had gotten home. Please tell us about what happened that night.
I came home, I pulled into the driveway, and because I was home first, I parked closest to the house. It's kind of a gravel pad that we park on, and I pulled up, and when I turned into our drive, I thought I saw a shadow. I backed up real quick to see if it was the shadow or if there was something there. When I backed up, my light just caught the well house, and I thought, well, your mind plays tricks on you, and I was already kind of nervous about being home alone. So I pulled up, parked the car, grabbed my bag, and started walking towards the house. I probably got 15 or 20 feet from the car, and something where the well house was had, for lack of a better term, all I could picture was like a giant fist hitting the top of that, just this loud, huge bang of metal. And when I looked back over there, there was just this huge black shadow right where I'd seen it before, where it hadn't been when I looked again. Something was there. And it was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like the breath just went out of me. It was just, okay, get in the house, don't look back, don't stop. And I remember just walking as quickly as I could to the house, getting in, locking the door, and just sitting there thinking, okay, in 2 hours he's going to be home, and I won't be alone anymore. The rest of the night, I mean, any little sound, the wind makes, you just kind of freak out and think, okay, what's going to happen next? Luckily, he came home a couple hours later, and, telling him about it, and he was like, well, I didn't see anything when I came home. It seems real quiet. When we looked at it the next day, there was a definite indentation where either something had been hit against it, or whether it was a fist or a rock or something had made a huge dent.
When you looked over and saw that black shape in the woods there, how close were you to it?
The well house was probably about 20, 25 feet from where I parked my car, and I would say the well house was probably about 4 by 6, and it was standing on the back side of the well house. So when I pulled in, I think it was on the edge of the well house, and when I saw the shadow, I think it moved towards the back of the well house and maybe ducked down into where those trees are. And when I backed back up, I think it was crouched already. And I think when I pulled back in, I didn't see anything. And because I was closest to the house, I think it gave me, an extra probably 10 feet from where I would have parked if I would have been the second person home. But because I took that first parking stall, I think I was probably a good 50 feet, somewhere in there, because my car was in between. But I definitely didn't want to stand out there and see what was going to come out from behind that well house and behind that stand of trees.
Oh no, I don't blame you. 50 feet, that is way too close for comfort, especially when you're talking about something like a dog man. We don't know for sure that it was a dog man that night, but when you consider all the things that have happened and continue to happen in that area, it sure does seem to be the most likely suspect. Mike, in 2011, things really intensified around your property. At about 2:30 a.m. one night, you two were sitting on the couch asleep when suddenly you realized you had an unwelcome visitor. Please tell us about what you saw when you woke up that night.
We had been watching a movie that night, and I believe the next day we were off work, so it was just a matter of us relaxing on the couch and just watching the movie, and before we knew it, we had both just fell asleep. When we had fallen asleep, we had actually left our curtains open. At that time, we still hadn't had our yard light put up yet. You could see on one part where our porch light hit, but on the other side where our curtains were open, it was just pitch black. Mary and I had been asleep for maybe 30 minutes. Something startled me. I woke up and something just didn't feel right. I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to wake Mary up and we're just going to head on to bed. I didn't turn my head, but I kind of shifted my eyes over to where the curtains were open, and that's when I saw two yellow eyes looking directly in our house, and the head, I didn't see the ears this time because it was still dark, but there was darkness, and in the center of all that darkness where our window was open was the biggest snout I had ever seen. It was really, really big. Its eyes were looking right at me. I was trying not to freeze. I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm just going to pretend like I'm not seeing it. I'm just going to nudge Mary and say, let's go to bed. I had tapped her, and she woke up and looked at me. We had actually made eye contact, and I kind of motioned with my eyes, look at the window. I had actually told her, well, I'm going to go get the box and put it up so we can go to bed, which that was just basically, I was just trying to think of something where it sounded at least somewhat normal, which I hope she was going to read as I'm going to go get the gun. I'll be right back. I had actually stepped in the bedroom and grabbed it, and when I was walking back, it actually was still pressed up against the screen, looking at us. I'll never forget as yellow as the eyes were, and we never saw any teeth, but it was almost like its face was pressed against the screen and was almost like trying to get a scent of our house. I looked at Mary and I said, okay, I'm going to go out the back deck and I'm going to flank it. I pull out my firearm and hit the back deck real quick. I'm walking across, and as I'm doing it, Mary said that all of a sudden what we had both seen in the window was no longer there, but she had heard something heavy running. I'll let Mary kind of describe the running part.
He went out on the back deck, and it was just a few seconds after he was out there. I don't think he'd even made it to the steps yet, and I could hear just something out in that dirt. Right between our trees, we'd had a lot of erosion, and so there was a lot of grass missing, and something had been out in that dirt just moving quickly. And when it got over towards our cars, that's all gravel, you could hear it crunching, and it just tore off into the woods. I mean, he probably maybe missed it by 10 seconds, 20 seconds. I mean, it was a lot quicker than he was. And as soon as it hit the woods, the blackness just, it swallowed it up. There was just nothing to be seen.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have stopped 10 feet inside the woods and been standing there watching us, and we wouldn't have had any idea. None.
Ooh. You said its eyes were a strong yellow color, but was there enough light shining on it for you to make out what color its fur was?
It was black. You could see the outline of its face. There was a snout. The snout was really huge. Like I said, I never got to see any teeth, but it was almost like it was trying to maybe get a smell for our house, our living room. our kitchen light was still on and our dining room light, so the dining room light illuminates quite a bit. So when it was looking in, I don't think it actually realized that light was actually on its face. And it didn't realize that we could see until something was pressed against our screen. Where our house sits, we're probably about 6 feet off the ground. I went out there and measured it, and I want to say at the very least, this thing was probably 6'2" to 6'3", depending on if it was actually leaning down trying to smell in or not. But that's just where I measured it from, where I saw its face, and at the very least, it was going to be around 6'2".
Yeah, for a lot of people, that's their worst nightmare, to wake up when you're sitting on the couch like that asleep and see that something monstrous like that's looking in the window at you. That's rough. As you two are sitting there looking at this thing, looking through the window at you, were you able to pick up on any emotions that it might have been conveying? Was it angry? What kind of emotions did it seem to be putting out?
The only thing that I had really gotten out of it was curiosity. I was wondering if maybe it was going to announce itself and try to scare us, and just by waking up, maybe we had thrown it off its game a little bit. But the way it was smelling, though, I mean, I actually heard the sniffing sound. I mean, I heard it, and that's what really gave me the biggest chill was, okay, I'm not dreaming. I'm seeing this right now. What is it doing now? I mean, this does not make any sense. Why is it trying to smell the inside of our house? And the way it was pressed up against the screen just made it all the more creepier.
Oh, I'm sure it did. I don't have any doubts about that. Mary, about a month after that last incident, you were coming home from work when you saw what you thought was your dog by a tree in your front yard. Please tell us about what happened that night and how it played out.
That night still scares me pretty bad. I came home, and our road that we come off the pavement kind of tees off, and we take a right turn, and right when your lights hit, that's the beginning of our property. I turned on, and I seen the tail end of our dog in the front yard. He was kind of up against the tree, kind of if you've ever seen a dog like tree a cat or tree a raccoon. You know, they'll stand up against the tree and bark at it and keep it from coming down. And I thought, okay, you know, he's got the neighbor cat up there. He chased the raccoon up the tree, and he's proud of it. Looking back, I was really dumb. I had pulled up against the edge of the road right on the ditch, and I'd stopped my car and rolled down the window, and I'm talking to this dog, you know, hey, buddy, what are you doing? And kind of seeing, you know, just the tail didn't wag, but there was a, you know, the tail was there, and our dog was, you know, really dark black. And I thought, okay, he's really excited, but he didn't make really any noise. He just stood there up against this tree. I talked to him for about 30 or 40 seconds and really wasn't getting a response from him. And so I had decided to just go ahead and park and go get a flashlight and see what he'd gotten up in that tree. I went to the driveway and pulled in and rolled up my windows and shut off the car and grabbed all my stuff and was walking towards the house. And at that point, we still didn't have a street light, and so the only light was coming off the front porch steps. I remember walking up, talking to him still. You know, like you're a goofy dog. You know, you're still over there messing with whatever's in the tree, jumping around. You know, by this point, he's normally happy and excited to see me, and it wasn't anything like that. It was just really strange. When I got up closer to the house, I just noticed that I couldn't see his face. He was like, I guess the best way to describe it is if I was standing up against a tree and kind of had my head down against my shoulder would be the best way to describe it. It was like he was up on the tree but not looking up. It was almost like he was hiding his face from me. And I just thought, why would my dog act this way? Well, I'd gotten 2 steps up. I think I was just going to the 3rd step. I think we have 4 or 5 steps up to our level. I got into like the 3rd step, and I just got this horrible chill. I mean, just goosebumps, you know, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, and it was just like something's wrong. Something is so wrong right now. And I was like just scared, instantly scared. And I thought, okay, I've got the keys in my hand. Something's not right. The best thing I need to do is get in the house. And I remember going up the steps rather quickly and opening up our screen door, and I heard our dog, and I thought, well, finally he's going to talk. He's going to say something. You know, I'm going to hear a bark, a whimper, a whine. But it wasn't coming from the tree. It was coming from the other side of the house. Where our front door is, the next room is our bedroom, and right around the corner of our bedroom was where our dog was coming from. he came out, and I could just see him in the light of the steps. He had his tail tucked. He was really quiet. He wasn't barking or happy to see me in any sort. He looked very, very, very nervous, very, very afraid. And he kept looking towards the tree. And I thought, at that moment in time, it just dawned on me, whatever I've been talking to, whatever I've been trying to get to come, and pay me some mind, wasn't our dog at all. It was the scariest feeling. I mean, it was just, I was so stupid. I remember just telling him to go in his doghouse and opening up the door really quick, latching it, making sure the screen door was locked and the door was locked. I think I threw something up against the door, and I was just sitting there thinking, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm so lucky to be in the house at this moment, and all it kept flashing before me was how much smaller my dog was than what I'd been talking to. And when I started really picturing it, my dog didn't have a bushy tail. He was a black lab pit bull cross, and he was really black. This thing was kind of scruffy looking, and 4 times the size of my dog. I thought the biggerness of what he was, I thought was Shadow. I never took into consideration it was something so much bigger that wasn't our dog at all until I was in the house, saying this little prayer of, thank God I'm still here. I don't think I ever want to go outside again. And I remember just waiting until Mike had gotten home to tell him, we're getting a street light, we're buying more guns, we need more dogs. That was just too close.
Oh, I'd say it was. Thank goodness it didn't turn out any worse than it did.
Yeah, absolutely. That, like you said, once you've seen something like that, you definitely know that nightmares are real. You really can't unsee those things. They're there forever. I really do wish I could unsee it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Well, Mike and Mary, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to come on the show and share all these experiences with us. Listeners, understand this isn't where the story ends. Mike and Mary are going to be back for next week's show to tell you about all the other incidents that have happened since. There's a lot more to go over. But like I said, Mike and Mary, thanks again so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
We're really glad we're able to share it. Close friends and family, they know about what has happened, and as crazy as it sounds, we've had family members that have seen stuff out here. We've had friends that have seen stuff out here, friends that won't come here after dark. Mary's sister, she actually had her own encounter when she was younger. When she was younger, they lived in another state, and what she had seen one night has traumatized her, and when we've talked about what's happened out here, she will only come out and visit during the daytime. But we're really glad that we've got your listeners that we can share this information with, and maybe there's something that they can draw from us that'll help save them, or at least open other people's eyes to being able to share too, in case they're unable to say anything and they don't have anyone to talk to about it. I mean, there's listeners out there who have seen these. Mary and I are 2 of them.
Yeah, we're definitely firm believers of there's other things out there, and things definitely do go bump in the night.
Yeah, unfortunately they do. After all you've been through, I'm not surprised you feel that way. Well, thanks again for coming on and sharing all the details of these experiences. I really do appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to next week.
Thank you, Vic.
Thank you.
Oh, you're both welcome. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.